Hi everyone, it's Jen with Spirited Saturdays, and this week we're talking about self-nurturance and self-empowerment. That's the topic that we're all discussing this week. I actually, though, in realizing this, I realized that I had a lot to say about self-nurturance on its own, so I'm just going to actually talk about that, and please check out the other videos from the other girls about self-empowerment as well, because they're great and they have a lot to say about that. So the first thing I want to talk about is something that Rachel brought up, which was that in the top, when we were discussing the topic and what we were going to do as a channel, she said that often we feel like we are giving too much to ourselves and not enough to others. And so that's like kind of an inherent trait in eating disorders, is you feel you have this like misguided perception, this sort of distorted perception that you're taking, you're giving yourself too much, or you're taking too much, or that you can say that you need too much, you're needing too much, and on the flip side you're not giving enough to others, and so that's false. But in order to compensate for that false belief, we end up going on overdrive and giving even more to others and even less to ourselves when we weren't even doing enough to begin with for ourselves. So that is, that really sparked a whole train of thought in me, and I guess it made me think about a couple of questions that I wanted to pose to you guys. So I'm going to start off asking you two questions. What does food give you that you are afraid to take of? And what does food give you that you feel is lacking somewhere else in your life or within you? So food, in this regard, in relevance to this video, food can symbolize nurturance. And if this applies to you, then think about this. Why are you afraid to take of nurturance? Or on the other hand, why are you afraid of not getting nurturance? This could play out in various eating disordered behaviors. I think that eating disordered individuals generally have a hard time separating food as a symbol from food as a need. I think we attach meaning to food that isn't necessarily for survival, and how we respond to that meaning can determine which kind of eating disordered behavior we present. If you look at food as nurturance, if you see food as nurturance, you may go to it in order to feel nurtured, or you may stay away from it because you are afraid of nurturance, or you feel unworthy of nurturance. But you're responding to the meaning, not to the food itself, just whatever the food represents for you. And so the reason you might, for example, keep going to food for nurturance, why you might go to that extreme and feel unable to stop, is probably because food will never give you what you're looking for. It will never give you what you ultimately essentially need at the core. It's never going to be enough. Just like any eating disordered behavior is never going to be enough. And you build a tolerance, and so, but I'll go back to that in a second. It's like eating a lot of bananas when you really want an apple, but there's no apple available. A really watered down version of this, but you might be totally full because the need for an apple was but the need for an apple was not filled, so you're still needing something and you still have that void inside. But if you need nurturing and you fulfill that need in a healthy way, the need will be taken care of, and you won't feel deprived the moment you stop having it, the moment you stop having the nurturance. You won't feel like you need a nurturance fix. You won't develop a tolerance to nurturance and need more and more each time. Because you're being filled up with exactly what you need each time. And if it's in the context of a healthy relationship, you will learn that you can expect it, and that that it's not conditional, and that and you won't be afraid of losing it. So if you can try to separate this for a moment and think about, what does food represent for you? And if the answer is some kind of nurturance, then ask yourself, what do you really want? What would be your ideal nurturing situation? What role would the nurturer play? What role would you play? How would they nurture you? Experience it with all of your senses except taste, just for now. What does nurturance smell, sound, feel, look like? Is there somebody in your life who you can think of who warmly gives you a feeling of nurturance without having to be near them, just the thought of them? Just the thought of this person nurturing you, or just the thought of their presence can be nurturing by itself. And then notice how you react to feeling what you actually need, to experiencing what you actually need, and to understanding what you actually need. Are you scared? Are you envious? Are you feeling undeserving of it? Are you feeling panicky or sad or angry? And are you judging yourself for acknowledging that you have needs and for however you react to that acknowledgement? For example, are you judging that acknowledging that your need are you judging that acknowledging this need makes you sad? Are you judging yourself for having needs? Did you think you were supposed to be above needs, immune to needs? So be honest with yourself, write about it, talk about it, whatever you need to explore and debunk whatever beliefs you have about yourself that are telling you you don't deserve or you shouldn't need, etc. Once you realize it's okay to have needs and you're ready to try to cope with that realization, with the needs, without using behaviors, you might want to try some coping mechanisms to prepare yourself for when the strong feelings arise and the urges come on. So some things that have helped me, and these are way pre-eating disorder, when I was a kid, some of them, but imagining the person who makes you feel most nurtured. First, you can have many people lined up in your mind, ready to go for any particular moment. There's never a shortage of people to imagine, but you imagine this person and imagine them holding you, or imagine them holding your hand, or imagine them just looking at you, witnessing you, giving you that feeling of being present. Witnessing is a big part of healing. That's something I learned in therapy. Just being seen and being loved and cared for, having that person there could really, really bring you so much comfort and safety. So when I was little, I would go to sleep often imagining somebody in my life who I considered extremely warm and nurturing. And I'd imagine this person sitting next to me in my bed and just watching me in a very caring kind of way. And in doing that, I felt a lot less alone. Every once in a while, I still do this if I need to, but I've never actually told anybody about it, so that's cool. Consider yourselves lucky for getting the debut of that coping mechanism, which I didn't realize was a coping mechanism at the time, so yay me. But yeah, so another thing is, like I said, but this is something I learned in therapy, hold my own hand, and it's imagine it's another person's hand. I know that sounds kind of strange, but if you do that and you imagine it's somebody else's hand, and again, if you have trouble like dissociating and things like that, I would suggest to go through these with your therapist before you try them. But yeah, assuming you can handle this and assuming that you're healthy enough in other kinds of ways to do these things and imagine things without going into a whole other reality and not being able to tell reality from imagination, then these things are, I think, okay to do generally. I also try to remember being in certain places with people. Like when I was growing up, my grandparents' apartment, I spent a lot of time there growing up, and I remember the smells and sights, and that makes me feel connected and nurtured and safe. Also remember that this entity, this mechanism doesn't have to be imaginary, this person. You can actually approach someone who you feel is in a position to give you a sense of safety and comfort and spend time with them or talk to them or hug them. Let yourself be nurtured. Let yourself be given comfort and safety. It's one of the best ways to learn to develop trust. And if you let yourself consistently be given that, and in that sense shown that it is okay, safe, unconditional, doesn't turn on you, etc., you're learning a lot about trust through experience. Self-nurturance doesn't have to involve others necessarily. It can be along the same line as self-soothing and giving yourself nurturance, giving yourself the gift of care and safety and comfort, whether that's a bubble bath or writing in a journal or making art or making yourself something edible that doesn't trigger you, that you really, really don't associate with the eating disorder. If there's something, or maybe a certain kind of tea or coffee or something like that, that you really don't associate with destructive behaviors. Or take extra good care of yourself in terms of maybe certain kinds of herbs or vitamins that you may not need for survival necessarily, but that will improve your quality of life and just make you feel good. Or breathing in incense or oils or things like that. So I want to talk about food as nourishment versus food as nurturer. There's a huge distinction. First of all, I think nourishment can mean many things. It can mean not just the physical, it can mean emotional nourishment. It can mean spiritual and loving nourishment. And in that case, nourishing yourself with delicious food, for example, an extra piece of cake or whatever it may be, is okay, and it's encouraged. If it's something that you felt was a challenge, you felt maybe paralyzed to do, that's okay. And as long as you do it in the context of health and not your disorder, it's encouraged. But an extra piece of cake or whatever, when done out of kindness and care, is cause for you to celebrate yourself, to celebrate your recovery, whatever that means for you. It's not, and it never becomes your nurturer. That food is not your nurturer. The cake, whatever it is not your caretaker or a person or a symbol for that. Not that it would be a person. Lost train of thought for 2 seconds. Getting back on train. If you can practice having a challenge with a nurturing person, a challenge food with a nurturing person there with you, then maybe you can get a real experiential understanding of the difference between the two, of the difference between nourishment and nurturing. And you can experience both at the same time and see, hey, one is not the other. Food can be a delicious part of bonding with another person, but the bonding is the nurturance, and the food is still the nourishment. Even if that nourishment is making you happy, even if that nourishment is making you feel something good, it's never your caretaker. It's never your go-to for protection. That's the other thing. Nurturance is often synonymous with protection. We depend on our nurturers to protect us sometimes in some way, not necessarily physically, but in some way, emotional protection. And so food, in whatever meaning you attach to it, will not protect you in the same way, nor can refraining from food protect us. Engaging in eating disordered behaviors does not protect us, even though it may feel that way. I ask that you apply what I'm about to say to yourselves in whatever way you need, whichever way best fits your struggles with food, your sources of pain, your fears, your needs, your fears of needing, etc. The things that I'm about to say can be applied to anyone with any kind of eating disorder. Remember that you are allowed to eat. You are allowed to nourish yourself. You are worthy of nourishment. You are allowed to feel connected to the food you eat. You are allowed to feel happy about the food you eat. You are allowed to enjoy the food you eat. You are allowed to eat freely and without fear. You are allowed to receive nurturance. You are worthy of nurturance. You are worthy of love. You are worthy of protection. You are allowed to nourish yourself. You are allowed to receive nurturance. You are allowed to let others nourish you. You are allowed to let others nurture you. You deserve nourishment. You deserve nurturance. And that's what I have to say about that topic. So hope you enjoyed this, and ask anything if you need to, and I will see you next week. Take care of yourselves.